Syria is in the news a lot lately, and we hear a lot about what's going on there currently. But what I think a lot of people don't know is how significant Syria was in the Bible and how many times it's mentioned. And maybe we could discuss that a little bit.
Well, I'll be happy to do that. Actually, Syria gave the world great civilization. It's from the beginning of time. Syria is mentioned throughout the pages of the Bible, in the Old Testament and in the New Testament. Many times it's mentioned about wars or covenants of peace with Israel. But because of time, I will focus only on few things that mentioned in the Bible. The famous story in the Old Testament, in the Second Kings, it speaks about a chief army captain. His name is Naaman the Syrian, or the Aramaic. He was a leper. So he was introduced to go to the prophet in Israel, the prophet Elisha, who told him to go and dip in the Jordan 7 times, and he was purified, he was cured, he was healed. As a result of that, a great relationship started between the two countries. And of course, the Bible says God brought salvation through him, or through what had happened to him. Interestingly, many years later, when Jesus spoke in the synagogue in Nazareth, he brought two stories concerning two Gentile people. One is the story of Naaman during the time of Elisha, that he was the only one that was cured or healed from leprosy. And the other story, of course, is the woman of Phoenicia in that region, the region of the north. So Syria is very significant, introduced great civilization, but also it is mentioned in the New Testament. During the Roman time, it was a province of Syria. In fact, the Gospel of Luke, the historian, speaks about the birth of Jesus during the time of Quirinius. Quirinius, the governor of Syria. So during that time, Jesus was born. But let's skip about the most important stories. One of the most important stories is, I call it the story of the beginnings. It's when Jesus took his disciples to Banias, that is Caesarea Philippi. It's in the region of Syria. And there he asked a question, who do people say that I am the Son of Man? Of course, we know Peter said, you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. And that was a great revelation that was revealed to Peter about the identity of Jesus and about the character of Jesus. But also within the same context, Jesus for the first time prophesied about the beginning or the birth of the church. He spoke about his sufferings in Jerusalem, and he spoke about his second coming. And all these, it was in the Syria region, in that area of Caesarea Philippi. The most also famous story is the conversion of Saul of Tarsus, who met the risen Lord on the road close to Damascus. And the Lord Jesus changed Saul radically, who became the Apostle Paul, one of the greatest missionary in the Bible, who spread Christianity throughout the known world at that time, in Africa, Asia, and in Europe. But also Syria plays a significant role because it became the headquarter for missionaries, for missions. It's Antioch, Syria. It's true today the borders are different because it's in Turkey now, but it is very close to Aleppo actually. It's not even 100 kilometers. This is where the church prayed, laid hands, and Paul was sent on his missionary journeys, and he came back to Antioch to report, about his missionary journeys. Actually, it was the missionary place when Paul was converted. He was filled with the power of the Holy Spirit through Ananias, who laid hands on him, who began to speak in Damascus, and he was saved in Damascus and delivered from the enemies in Damascus by lowering him through the wall. So it plays a great significance, but not only during the New Testament time, but in church history time. Throughout church history, it was the seat of, the patriarch. It was the seat of many conventions, and of course, many apostles, many ministers, many historians, many people who served in that vicinity spread the good news all over. So it did play a great significance in the Bible.
One thing I also wanted to ask you was, what was it specifically about Antioch that made it so qualified to be the center of missions in the early church?
Well, Antioch was the largest city in those days in Syria. It was a huge community, Jewish community, who lived there. And it was, in fact, a melting pot, so many nationalities. And it was great schools where they had many philosophies that are mentioned in the New Testament, but also older philosophies that were taught in Antioch. It was a great civilization and a great tolerance between different groups. There were Jews, there were Romans, there were Greeks, and it was a multinational city, more than 300,000 people. Also strategically located very close distance to the Mediterranean Sea, so that helped the spread through the sea, for Paul to go or other missionaries to go through the sea, but also through land. It was a connecting, like Palestine in those days, connecting between two worlds, between Asia and between Africa.
Well, thank you for sharing all that information. Lots of interesting stuff in the Bible about Syria.
No, because it's very important for people to understand that, because sometimes when we think about Syria, we always immediately move to politics of this day and the religion that dictates, of this time. And of course, because it is so much on the news, so we are fed with the information. Perhaps it is negative about the country or the people, but the reality is Syria has introduced to the world great civilizations, great science, great knowledge, great things throughout history, until church history, until, was of course conquered later on, that everything has changed.
Thank you, Baba. That was interesting.
Thank you.
Stay tuned. We'll be right back. So let's talk a little bit about the current situation in Syria right now. It just seems so hopeless in some ways. I mean, the sheer magnitude of the refugee crisis is overwhelming. Some of the statistics that I found from Amnesty International were that there's over 5 million refugees right now in 5 countries: Turkey, Lebanon, Jordan, Iraq, and Egypt. And that over 220, maybe more, thousand people have been killed.
Oh, more than 450, almost 500,000 people killed in Syria, at least.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a huge number, it's hard to comprehend.
Absolutely, but more difficult, Sarah, Habibti, is the outcome of that war. More than 2 million people lost leg, hand, eye, organ. I mean, this is a dilemma that they have to deal with it psychologically after the war. Yeah. And you mentioned about refugees, but this is also nothing compared to the refugees inside of Syria.
Yeah.
Keep in mind, Syria was about 23 million people. More than half of the country are refugees. Most of these refugees are in Syria. That means their places has been utterly destroyed, and they have to move into another areas, another parts of Syria. It's very sad.
So they're
sad.
internally displaced within
Yes.
their country.
Yeah, I mean,
But
they have
they're
nothing.
still-
They have no place to stay. I mean, their homes have been destroyed, properties have been taken, kidnapping, the killing, the raping. I mean, just such a dark area. Yeah.
Another statistic I had read was that the number was around 12.8 million people inside of Syria that are in urgent need of aid.
Absolutely.
So medical, you know, anything else, you name it, they're in urgent need.
Yeah, food, medical, I mean, the whole idea, the children, there is a lot of children, they need school, they need teaching, they need to follow up with these, with these people. So it's ravaged with war, and the aftermath of the war, it's more sad and more difficult, yeah.
That's something that interests me as a counselor is the psychological effects and the effects of going through all that trauma, especially for the children. I often think about that if people are getting that kind of care that they need for the trauma that they've been through. And it's hard. I would probably say no, they're not at this point.
Well, you know what, you know, I go a lot to Syria. I've made the 3 trips, but let me tell you one of the stories that I was having breakfast in the market area in Damascus, where a huge shell came about 100 meters. There were a group of children just passing in the street when the shell fell.
Do you mean a bomb when you
A
say
bomb,
shell? Is
like
that...
a shell, that means either a Katyusha or a missile hit an area, because the whole street was shaken. So I saw the fear in the eyes of the children and running into every direction. So that is a simple story that I saw in front of my eyes about the whole idea of fear and the dilemma and how to deal with these children who has been through the war. Now what we are coming on the 7th year in Syria. It's very sad.
That means that there's a whole generation of children that have been born that all they know is war. That's their reality.
That's true. That's correct. You know, all their life is war, and those who, let's say, 7 years old, now they are 14 years old, all that they have seen of their childhood is devastation and war or famine or difficult situation, because they need food, they need medicine, they need care, school, all these, you know, water, electricity. I mean, name it, you know, on, so that they have been deprived of all these things.
Another thing I just wanted to mention was about international resettlement of refugees. The statistic I have here is that only 104,000 resettlement spaces have been offered internationally, which is about 2.6% of the total population of refugees. So such a small fraction of refugees are actually being resettled internationally. Why do you think that that is? That's such a low number.
Keep in mind, this is like in Europe or North America, but keep in mind, most of these refugees are waiting for the United Nations government sponsorship or church or mosque sponsorship. But a lot of these people that you mentioned, they are in Turkey today. There is a big number in Turkey, in Lebanon, in Jordan, and of course they go through Greece. There's a lot in the Greek islands in Greece. There's a lot of refugees. So these huge numbers, they are waiting for resettlement unless a solution, like drastic solution, will come to Syria, where you bring all these people back to their own beautiful and wonderful country.
I'm sure that's probably what many refugees would love. They want to go and be in their home, but due to tragic circumstances, they've had to leave.
Yeah, but you know, I have been in Syria. Some people, like for example, now they freed Aleppo. A lot of people, they have depression because they went to their place. It's utterly destroyed. They can't even locate the place or the house. So how are they going to build a house? Where can they get the money? And so many other questions that they have to deal with it. So many people lost hope because of these circumstances.
It sounds like there's just levels and levels to this problem that
Oh yeah, we can share about it maybe after the break, but it's miles and miles and miles of devastation. All that you see, destruction and devastation there.
Canada has accepted over 40,000 Syrian refugees since January 2017.
16 probably.
I think as of January,
as
of this January,
okay.
about just over 40,000 Syrian refugees.
Okay.
Does that number make you proud? Do you think that's enough? Do you think we can do more as a country?
Every country can do more, of course, but there is a process. And that's what, the process is. There is a lot of psychological background and thinking about who is coming to Canada. So I don't know if this is enough or not enough, for Canada, but we help people, period. It doesn't matter. So I'm proud of Canada because Canada, one of the countries, accepted people and brought people to help them and save them from their ravaged and dark area, because in the name of religion, in the name of politics, in the name of whatever you want to call it, we see this destruction in hope that they come and find a new and better life in this beautiful country.
Thank you, Baba.
Yeah.
Stay tuned, we'll be back soon. Light for All Nations has been involved in Syria for a while now. How long has it been that?
Well, actually, it's a Macedonian call. We started working in Iraq 4 years ago, but in Syria last year, 2016, and now 2017, we have been involved in Syria. Just, for our audience to let them know that we have television ministry that is reaching Syria and that part of the world many, many, many years ago. But involved in Syria, it was last year.
Yes, so the television ministry goes way back, but actually on the ground, it's been about a year in Syria.
Yes.
Okay. So tell me about what kinds of things Light for All Nations is actually doing on the ground in Syria.
Well, just to give an idea to also our audience, when we say Light for All Nations, that's the umbrella of ministries, what we do now, Let There Be Light, the English part of that production. Because Light for All Nations, we have been in the ministry 35 years, and we have been reaching that part of the world on many satellite stations. Every week we have more than 40 million people can watch us in that part of the world.
In Arabic and
in
other
Arabic languages, and also we translate into Urdu, Farsi and Turkish language, and now we are doing it in English language. What was, as I mentioned, it was a Macedonian call, because our ministry is about spreading the good news, speaking about the uniqueness of Jesus Christ, His superiority, His love, because that, when I talk about His love and His superiority, I studied comparative religions, and of course, there is no, comparison. I say it with humility, but also with respect and with great love. So the answer and the hope is really Jesus Christ. So the door was open to go to Syria. I did 3 trips. The first trip is I went to Damascus and Homs. The second trip I went bordering Turkey. It's an area, it's called Kamishli, Hasaki, and Malkiye. It's a Kurdish area controlled by the Kurds. And I just recently came back from Aleppo, where I spent most of the time. What we are doing is humanitarian aid relief work that includes everything. Helping with fuel for heating in the wintertime, blankets, jackets, food. We help the children, things pertaining women, and we help also the churches to stand and to keep the message and help also the people there. I am very proud of Canadians who supported us, supported this cause. In fact, as I'm speaking to you, I'm planning another 3 trips by the end of the year. So what we do is help to relieve people from the burden, from hardship, from difficulty there.
And all of this obviously costs money, and I'm just curious, where do these funds come from to be able to provide all of this relief?
Well, people support, whether in Canada or United States, and as you know, we have charity number both in the United States and in Canada for income tax receipt purposes. When we addressed the need for Syria, people are responding, and they are responding very generous, in a very generous way. So going there it was such a blessing, because here in the midst of war and in the midst of lots of shelling, I have been there. They have seen me on television, so they were so thankful, leaving a safe country like Canada to literally to risk and go there to Syria. But I always say the safest place is to be in God's will. I went there, also we interviewed people, interviewed leaders, political leaders, religious leaders, and just came back from Aleppo. The situation is extremely sad, because as I was interviewing people in the ruined areas, you could even smell corpses underneath the destruction. That tells you what's going on in that land.
They're right in the middle of it still, and doesn't seem to be a solution in sight, which is the sad part, I think. But
the solution is Jesus through his church when we stand with the wonderful people of Syria.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Baba, and I really look forward to hearing about your future trips to Syria as well.
I will.
We'll be back soon with some closing thoughts. There's so much more that could be said about the crisis in Syria right now, but what I really think would be good to close with is maybe directing people who are listening to you and inspired by the work that Light for All Nations is doing. How can they support? How can they get involved in supporting this mission in Syria?
Well, thank you, Sarah, for mentioning that. I just wanted to say that our focus is to present Jesus Christ, the message of salvation. That's our mission, that's our heart, that's our vision, that's who we are, is really to present Jesus Christ in areas where they have a lot of misconceptions about Jesus Christ and about the knowledge of him, but also helping in every area, in every direction, because this is a season, the right season. We have to plant in the right season. We have to be in the right place at the right time. You know, Sarah, I mean, you lived in the Middle East. It's so unpredictable. We can't predict the Middle East. Today, safety, tomorrow, war. We don't know. But what I know is we have to really step into whatever opportunity that God is opening. I visited Syria. I was there. I have seen the destruction. I have seen what ISIS did in the churches in Homs. I have seen what the devastation, the destruction in Aleppo. But also I have seen hope in through some eyes, you know, who are trying to build there, who are trying to bring a message of hope. So I want to challenge everyone who is watching us. Will you help us? Because what we do is way bigger, you know, on the scale than just helping. We are literally all over the world. We have been in Iraq, in Syria. We're helping in many areas. And definitely we need partners like you to stand alongside with us and to see the vision and the mission of Jesus, where all started in that region, in that part of the world. That is all about, is to spread the goodness, the kindness, the love of Jesus to everyone unconditionally. So perhaps it's on your heart to support, you know. You can either call us on the phone or you can write us, and definitely we would love to hear from you. Thank you so much, Sarah. So nice to do this program with you. May the Lord bless you. I'm so proud of you.
Thank you.
And
it's
also,
great to be here.
Great. Well, God bless you and keep us in your prayers.
These families have been through an awful lot, and they're moving to a place that's not their home, where they don't have their friends, and they don't have the support of their other family. And it's a challenge in so many ways. They've been through so much we can't even understand all they've been through. And so it was just a lot, and just to learn relationally, just to try to help make sure that we're helping them the best way that we can. And again, we're very thankful for the staff and individuals who stepped up.
You're watching Yes TV.
We've been married for a year and are living with your friends.
We want to start looking at houses.
To the house. To the house.
It's like a spa.
Oh, this is awesome.
Our house guests are never going to want to leave. This is like a real grown-up
Bedroom.
This is beautiful.
So what are we thinking here, living room?
I'm thinking library.